fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, and we've got Mr. Joe Goldberg in the house.
I'm in the house, but I should be outside. It's a gorgeous Chicago day.
Well, yeah, you should.
We'll take it.
You don't get many of them, you know. It's Chicago.
Been a little balmy, a little humid, but the rain and the wind came like a breath of fresh air, like an Al Warren blew across.
I was going to say I'm a little bit more balmy than fresh.
Yeah, right.
Well, speaking of fresh
and new.
Do you like that? Yeah. See, that was a good
segue.
I could have went the other way.
Yeah. Like you normally do.
Yeah. What are you trying to? Anyway, we're going to be talking about a book called The Locked Box, and it's a novel. It's by Parker Adams. So thank you for being here, Parker.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
We appreciate you being here. It's wonderful. So what can you tell us about writing? I mean, why are you writing? Are you stable or?
My wife would probably debate that idea. Some of my coworkers might too. So I'm a lawyer by day, and then writing's my hobby. So I do it early in the morning, and I've been writing books for about 19, 20 years. But this is my fourth one to come out. And it's a great hobby. I love the writing community. I love writing books, and I love reading books.
Something wrong with you.
Yeah. Wake up.
Yeah, wake up. You're a lawyer and you're a writer. Boy, why is it that you got into writing, Bud? What got you into there? Because you're still being a lawyer by day and all that.
Yeah, writing was never something I really contemplated as like an artistic career. Growing up, I was always going to be a research scientist. That was my goal. And writing was something that I kind of thought I was good at, but it was just kind of a skill. It was like, knowing statistics or something like that. And so when I got into science and went to grad school, all the folks in my laboratory would bring me their articles and have me mark them up and stuff. And when I decided to get out of science and get a different career, writing was one of those things that I listed out on the pad of, things I'm good at and what could I do with this. And that's kind of why I became a lawyer. But the creative writing really just came about because I was a big fan. I was a big reader. Read lots of mysteries and thrillers and science fiction growing up and all through my life. And, I was on a trip with my wife, right before my first child was born. And just like always, I stuck a bunch of paperbacks in the carry-on bag with me. That'll date me. But that's the kind of thing you used to do back before e-readers. And so I was sitting on a beach reading a book, and the writing in mysteries and thrillers is just so good. You read it, and I caught myself wondering, these guys are like the Olympic athletes of writing, and I wonder if I could write like that if I tried. And so it was sort of a little challenge to myself to see what I could do. And so we came back from vacation, and that's when I started. And that only took me 20 years to get 4 books out. So not a quick profession.
Sorry it didn't work.
Yeah. Underachiever. So I'll call you, your true name, Joe Reed, pseudonym is Parker Adams, right? So since I'm a Joe, you're a Joe, I'll call you Joe.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. Yeah.
Totally.
Pair of Joes. Yeah. So, you have, first of all, marine biologist, we're thinking Seinfeld, but, marine biologist, lawyer, writer, and the obvious question is commonality between the different professions.
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot. People ask me sort of how being a writer helps or informs being a lawyer or vice versa. And science sort of rolls right in there. I mean, there's a lot of research. I mean, in all 3 disciplines, you're kind of diving deep on things and learning about new things. And then in all 3, you're really trying to communicate complex ideas and stuff to a reader and get your ideas across. In litigation, so I'm a litigator. I stand up in court in front of juries and judges and things like that. And if you've ever watched, any of the legal shows, or if you've done jury duty or anything like that, we go in and we have a case at the end of the day that we present to the jury. And it's all these little, pieces of evidence that we've gathered, a document here or a witness statement there. If writing fiction is the reverse process, I get to start with the end. I know what happened. And then I get to take a hammer and smash the picture and take all those little pieces and, sprinkle them through the book for the reader and the main character to find. But it's really kind of the same process. It's taking little bits of information and assembling them into a cohesive package, and then communicating that to an audience.
So Lockbox, if I know correctly, is not a legal thriller, right? It's a heist book.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't write legal thrillers. My
What?
first.
And that's my question. Why not? Why aren't you Grissom or Thoreau? I mean, presumed innocent. You could have Jake Gyllenhaal being you on TV.
Yeah, because I do patent law, and so it's not exactly the
I take it back,
crackling,
sorry.
the crackling with suspense kind of stuff. We do computers and electrical engineering and biotech and stuff like that. So it's not stuff that lights your hair on fire.
Well, Joe doesn't have much hair.
Look, hey, I think between the three of us, I might be up there. So why a heist book, though?
Loved heists. My first three books, I guess you'd probably call action adventure. They center around an air marshal solving crimes that happen in and around airports and airplanes. But I was sitting at home during COVID and you're wondering what to do next with the Walker series when no one was flying and no one was traveling and everyone was sitting at home. And I loved heists growing up, everything from Ocean's 11 and the ones you think about, I go far enough back that it's, like the Taking of Pelham 123 and old stuff like that, The Sting. And, so I'm watching TV like we all were and seeing the empty freeways and, folks running around with masks. And it kind of occurred to me that it was a really good time if you wanted to pull off a really big crime. And that was sort of the idea that got it rolling was, what kind of heist would you conduct in the middle of a pandemic? And it sort of built around from there.
So who did you rob? Like, what did you do?
You got to read the book. That's my alibi.
He's the guy who took all the toilet paper from Costco.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew it. And no, okay. So now the difference is now this book that you've written, The Lockbox. The first thing I noticed is, with your other books under Joseph Reed, you were writing, it was Seth Walker's.
Yep.
Was your main character. Now on this one, if I'm right, your main character is like Monna Locke or Monna Locke.
Yep. Monna Locke.
Okay. So now you've gone from writing a male into a female.
Mm-hmm. How
is that for you? Like, what's your means of writing a female? Like, how do you deal with that?
Great question. And the choice to make her a woman was very deliberate for the story. But I think you come at it a couple of different ways. I'm the lone guy in my house. I have a wife. I have two daughters. All our pets are female. So I have lots of strong women in my life. And so hopefully I have a little bit of insight into, what makes women tick and stuff. And in a lot of ways, I mean, female characters are just characters. I mean, they have goals, they have fears, they have a backstory, all that kind of stuff. On the back end, once you finish a book and the further the main character is from you, I think you have a responsibility to try and get out with beta readers and do everything you can to make sure that you did the character justice. And so all my beta readers were female. A bunch were like Monna in different respects. Some were businesswomen, because she owns her own business. Some were mothers because she's a single mother. Some were veterans because she's a veteran. So you try and capture all those little pieces of what makes a character unique. And her being female is just one piece of that.
And safecracking and that kind of angle. How do you get the knowledge for that? Like, do you go around practicing, or no? Where do you study for something like that?
Yeah, this was a unique book compared to the Walker series. I mean, the Walker series, I travel a ton for work, and that's kind of why I set the books in airports and on airplanes, was I had a lot of experience with that firsthand. This one, like I said, I was writing during COVID, so we were all locked down. I did a ton of research online, and there's all kinds of things you can find online about safe crackers, safes, safe technology, all that kind of stuff. And then actually, it's funny. I went looking for like a store where you could buy safes, high-end safes, just to try and do some pictures and photo reference and stuff, and maybe some stuff for social media. And it turned out there was one right around the corner from my daughter's ballet studio, which I had no idea when I was writing the book. So I was able to get in there and see some safes and twist some dials and things like that. But a lot of the hardcore inner working stuff is online research and me just doing the same thing I do in my day job when I've got to figure out how a computer works or something like that.
So you could go check that out every time you went to ballet class.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I dropped her off and would go around the corner and you
don't have to pretend. We know it was your
Joe Tutu.
Yeah.
Hey Joe, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
About when you are writing and you're writing these crazy hours in the morning before you do your legal stuff.
Yeah.
How are you able to generate creativity? I know it's a baseline, podcast question, but everybody has their process and their style, and you write these crazy hours. So and you have a full-time job like a lot of people are listening to. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I go into every book with like a 2 to 4 page treatment. It's not really an outline. It's prose. But it tells sort of the high level story of the book. And that kind of keeps me on the straight and narrow. And that gives me, the start and the end and the few things in the middle that I think are most important to me as I'm getting started. And so if you think about that as like points on a line, I'm starting at A and I know I've got to get to E. I don't necessarily know what B, C, and D are. And that's some of the fun and some of the excitement and some of the mystery for me is how are you going to get from one point to another. But that 2 to 4 page treatment kind of keeps me honest about what is the story about. Am I making, positive, progress every day? And then, I write early in the morning. I get up at 4 every day to write. And, I go to bed trying to think about what I'm going to write the next day, whether it's, a certain scene or a certain chapter or whatever. And usually I find, even if you're stuck at something, if you're having a problem or you don't know how the character is going to go in dreams and all that stuff, it works itself out. And a lot of times, I wake up in the morning and I'm just raring to go and, I get in and the thing I thought was a problem, I've got an idea of how to fix it, or at least I'm energized about getting in there and doing it. And that sort of gets me through.
The action and the, I guess violence in a sense. How do you handle it with this book? Like this book's going to be different than your thrillers, so to speak, but there's still got to be action and crime and all this stuff like that. Are you conscious of how you write that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you go in like Walker is an air marshal, right? So he's a crackerjack shot. And so, going in that there's probably going to be, some gunfights and he's going to get called on to be a marksman kind of thing. In this book, Monna is not. I mean, she's just, she's a veteran. So, she's held the gun before. But she's just a single mom who's a businesswoman, and her business happens to be cracking safes. So that does change the parameters of the action a bit. But then you think about, okay, they're gonna try and pull off what could be the heist of the century. What does that look like? Who's going to be guarding that? Because their odds are, they're not just going to leave it out for anybody to take. And that kind of fills in, the action of, where the item is located, how they're going to get to it, how they're going to get through the defenses that are guarding it, and how they're going to get back out. And that was really the action of this book. There's a few other scenes. There's some training stuff that she does to get ready for the heist. And I should mention, she gets kidnapped to do this. She's being forced to do this. And so she's trying to escape the whole time and doesn't really want to participate in this. So there's some action there as well. But really the main action is when we get to the end and they're trying to pull off the caper.
Are there anything that you try to leave out of the book on purpose? I use it for, cancel yourself, whatever. Are there things that you just say, I'm not going to write that?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, I tried to make it different than Walker. I tried to make sure that I wasn't going over any old ground, and this was really, a book or the start of a series that would stand on its own. But I still think it's a Joe Reed book. It's, if you've read the Walker series, it's, there's a bunch of action and hopefully you're turning pages and I force you to stay up late at night. And so it's, I don't think there was anything I deliberately left out. I will say the challenge in this book, I think, was the pacing of it. If you think about it as 3 acts, the first act is pretty easy to set up. It's her introduction and her getting kidnapped to do this job. And the third act is pretty easy because that's the heist. But then in act 2, we've got to do a lot. We've got to introduce all the other members of the crew that she's doing this caper with. Like I said, she has to train for it. She's trying to escape. So there's a lot going on in act 2, and I worried a lot about the pace of act 2 and trying to make sure that it didn't bog down. And so we spent an awful lot of time, or I spent an awful lot of time really going over every word in act 2, even more than I normally do, just to try and make sure that act 2 moved along and there wasn't any extra there. So that's, if I was leaving something out, I was hopefully trimming the fat in act 2.
And so writing with a different name, I'm not sure. Most of the time when we talk to authors that do that, it's because they've changed the category, the genre really extremely, like they were writing, something like action and thriller, and then they go to romance or something like that. And it's a big difference. So it's
Sure.
good to have a different name, right? Because your fans get confused or whatever, the readers. These two are fairly similar. So why a different name as a writer?
Yeah, the Crooked Lane, who published Lockbox, they asked for the pen name. I think if you ask them, I think their reasoning was, like you said from the very start, I mean, they are both thrillers, but they are very distinct in the sense of, the Walker series is, a male air marshal. It's not really a military thriller, but it's military adjacent, you might say. Whereas this is a very different character, a very different world. And it's a very different kind of book. And so I think to give it a fresh start and really distinguish it from the Walker series, that's why they wanted the pen name. Is
there a subtext or a meaning in the Lockbox? Is there something other than the entertainment you want people to pick up on?
Yeah, I mean, I think all writers do this as some weird form of therapy. And so a lot of times the things you're working through in your life sort of pop out in the books in different ways. I wouldn't say I was super conscious of it when I was writing the book, but in talking to readers and in doing interviews like this with folks who've read the book, one of the themes I think that really comes out of it is about trust. Who can you trust? And a feeling of uncertainty. I wrote this during COVID, and it's set during the early days of COVID when folks, really didn't kind of know what was going on. And through all that, I mean, I think we were all sort of in our own way faced with a lot of uncertainty, not knowing how to keep ourselves safe, how to keep our loved ones safe, what it all meant, what the information we were getting was and how trustworthy was it. And I think all those kinds of things sort of come out in this book. I mean, Monna's dealing with the pandemic at the start and trying to balance her life and her son and her business and keep that going. And then, she's kidnapped and she's with this, mysterious crew of villains. Then she doesn't know whether she can trust any of them or whether any of them might be on her side. And then, there's all kinds of deception about the job is, what it might involve, what the actual target that they're trying to steal is, and stuff. So I think those themes of uncertainty and mystery and trust, I think those are really the key themes in the book.
Hey, Joe, can I ask a question about the COVID issue?
Sure.
Okay, so two things. You ask questions to authors that, like, I ignore COVID. It's not even in their books.
Yep.
You've embraced this. Okay. Is COVID a character? And question one. And two, were you worried about dredging up memories people are trying to forget from the COVID days?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it was a very sort of controversial choice. A lot of my author friends told me I was crazy to do anything with COVID in a book, for the reasons you say, that they were either writing books that were distinctly pre-COVID, or writing books that, sort of well after COVID, so you'd never know that it happened. When I originally sort of wrote this, I had the idea for a heist sort of in the drawer, and it was set during like a natural disaster, right? So it was I think it was like a California wildfire kind of thing, which was the reason that people were, running around and in masks, and there was an opening for this heist. But because of what COVID was and what I was going through, it just sort of naturally lent itself to that. COVID isn't a character in the book. It's not a central thing. It hangs there in the background as sort of window dressing. It allows the heist to happen. The reason they can try to pull off this big caper is because of lockdowns and everybody running around in masks and things being abnormal. But that's really, the length to which COVID sort of features prominently in the story. There is the uncertainty aspect of it and the fear aspect of it, but really, once the crew gets together, they're sort of in a bubble, just with each other. And so really COVID is more of a setting than a character, if that makes sense.
I also noticed that you do mention that your main character there, you say how she's getting chased out of the army for fighting back against abuse. So that must be a particularly important point of the story. Where does that come from?
So in trying to think about her story and where she fits in this caper and why she is where she is in her life. I'm a Navy brat. So I come at lots of these books with sort of a military kid's bent. Walker isn't a veteran, but there's other veterans sort of in that book. And so in thinking about, why she has landed in this weird profession, because safecracking isn't exactly like, something they advertise at the high school job fair, right? Monna is a blue collar kid. She grows up in a rural area. She's really good with her hands. She likes, sort of getting her hands dirty and doing mechanical things. And, one career path that makes a lot of sense, if that's your background, is to go into the military, because they've got a bunch of really fun toys to play with, and a bunch of big machines and things like that. And I know lots of people for whom that was the attraction to the military. But then you have to ask, well, okay, if she got in the military, why would she leave it? And what does that mean for where she is now? I don't want to give up too much of her backstory, because it does feature into the plot of the book. But why she left the military and what that has meant for, why she has a son and how she sort of got to where she is, all of that is sort of baked in, and we see that come to light as she's being forced to do this job that she really doesn't want to do.
And so, how is this all changing you, and how does this affect you when you write all of these books and about these subjects that some are very close to you and some aren't? But do you find that it affects your life?
Yeah. I think every one of the books affects your life. It reflects, a period that you're going through and something that you're going through. Like I said, as the author, I think you can't help but bake in a bunch of subconscious stuff that you're working through in these books. And so when you come out the back end and you look at it, I think it gives you a different picture or a different understanding of where you were and what you were trying to say. And then, seeing how those stories bounce off readers, is really interesting too. I mean, the stories and the characters take on a life of their own, right? And the characters and their actions and stuff mean different things to the reader because the reader sort of meets them where the reader is. And so, there's nothing better, I think, than you get like a fan letter or something like that about, how a book really moves somebody and what they take from that. And, that's all gold to me. It just as one quick example. I mean, Monna has a mentor figure in this book. He's a high school teacher. And he's sort of the one who sets her on a path to being, a productive member of society, if you will. And so I've had people really react to that character and her relationship with him in a really positive way, because I think, a lot of us have, that kind of person in our lives where maybe it's not our mother or our father, but it's somebody we meet out in the world who sort of changes our path and sets us in a better direction than we were going. And so, hearing that resonates with people and hearing that makes them feel good or inspires them to be, that kind of person to somebody else, that's all great.
So you've been doing this for, I think you said 19 years, several books.
Yeah.
You're a better writer, obviously. 19 years, you have a lot of practice. But what did you try to get better at? Or what do you feel your strength became as you wrote books that were non-published and books that were published? Because we all got them in the drawer, man.
Oh yeah, I got plenty in the drawer. It was really, you mentioned this earlier. It's about what you leave out, right? It's about where you start in the story. I was dumb enough to think, my first couple of manuscripts were good enough to sell. And I went out and I tried to sell them. And some of the constant feedback I got was, you're starting too early, start with action, you got to draw the reader in, that kind of thing. And so Takeoff, the first book I got published starts, literally in the middle of a gunfight, because I'd gotten that critique enough that I was going to kill that one and never hear that one again. And so I think with each one, you try and, get better about, what you include versus what you don't include, making sure you're giving the reader enough to go on, but trusting the reader that they can fill in, the negative space that you're leaving out, and still get what you want them to get out of it. I tend to write pretty, with a decent amount of detail, and, people say they're very visual books and they're action books. So you want a good sense of setting. And if you're having a chase, through a place, I think it really helps to understand the layout of the place so you can kind of picture the chase happening. So there's going to be some detail in there, but then you got to balance that off with the things you're leaving out. And so hopefully I'm better now than I was before about, leaving out the things that aren't important and really sort of setting the pace where, you're going to start with action and you're just going to keep reading and hopefully it's 2 a.m. and you tell yourself, okay, just one more chapter and I'm going to bed. And then hopefully I'll get you at the end of that chapter to turn the page and do some more. That's sort of, those were always the books I loved. And hopefully those are the books I can give people.
What's your relationship like with your main character? Like, do you hear her, see her? Do you feel her? Is it like watching a movie? How do you describe that relationship?
I think all of the above. I think as you settle in with the main character, you try and really understand how they think. I think it's important that they not just be, sort of a representation of you, but that they think, in different ways and have different reactions than you would, but you have sort of an innate sense for what those are. And it's kind of like, your spouse or your children. I mean, they're different people. They don't necessarily do the same things you would do in a given situation, but if you really know them, you kind of have a pretty good sense for what they're going to do if, X happens. And I think that's ultimately the way you want to feel about your main character, that you know what they would do in a certain situation and why, even if it's something totally different than what you would do. And it's well grounded in who they are and what they've experienced, so that it makes sense, even if it's a mistake, even if it's a dumb choice, even if it leads to bad things. You want those choices to make sense so that the reader, can embrace that person as well and sort of understand why they did what they did.
Now, social media. Website, what do you have, and do you like to have people interact with you?
Oh, love it. Nothing better. I have a webpage. It's josephreidbooks.com, REID. But because, like you said, I have a pen name for this book, if you type in parkeradamsbooks.com, you'll get to the same place. They're cross-linked to the same website. And then, again, I'm on all the platforms. I'm most frequently on Instagram, because I like pretty pictures. But there I'm Joseph Reid Books. Parker Adams Books also exists on Instagram, but it just sort of directs you over to my main feed. On Facebook, I'm Joseph Reid Books 1, because for some reason it wouldn't let me have Joseph Reid Books. But yeah, I'm most often on Instagram because with the Walker series, every day I posted a piece of what I called airport art. Some picture I snapped as I was moving through one of the many airports I go through for work. And then now with the Locke series, it's a lot of, I've been lucky enough, I toured a couple of very historic antique Locke collections as I was doing some of the research for this book. So I've got some pictures of the innards of that. And, I was just on tour doing some events, and so there's pictures from that. So pretty pictures makes everybody happy. So that's why I like being on Instagram.
Oh, you should be following Joe then.
Yeah. Those pictures aren't on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have everything up on the website so people can find you easily with one click, and appreciate it. Do you like getting reviews? Are you a big review guy? Do you read them, follow them, or do you stay away from that?
It's one of those things. Reading, I think too many of them can drive me crazy. But there are certainly nuggets of truth in them. And so, when the trade reviews come out, when you first release a book, the Publishers Weekly or the Kirkus and Book List, things like that, I certainly read those. Those are really important. And then the reader reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, I dip my toe in there every now and then to kind of see how people are reacting and what people are reacting to. If there's anything that's really consistent, that's sort of coming through across lots of people, I take that as truth, because, once is an accident, but you get more than a few people saying the same thing. They're not mistaken. It's you made a mistake or they're reacting to something you did on purpose. So yeah, I read them, but it's not like I'm every day, down in them, because I think that can drive you a little crazy.
We appreciate you being here. The book, The Lock Box, a novel, Parker Adams. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. It was really a pleasure, a great conversation, and I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.